My name is Vilma and I am a knitter from Finland, and today I want to talk about starting my autumn knitting. It's the beginning of September and the weather here is still very warm, but I still wanted to start my autumn knitting because I'm very excited about my plans. But to start off with, I want to talk about what I'm wearing, because this is a finished object that's only missing buttons. This is the Aamuyö cardigan by Pauliina Leisti. It was featured in last summer's Line magazine, number 17. And let me show a picture from the magazine. There. And the cardigan is knit using a silk mohair and an alpaca. The suggested yarns in the pattern are by Lang Yarns, but I used different ones. I used the silk mohair by Isajer and the alpaca yarn by Silke called Valparaiso. And the alpaca yarn is a white and then the silk mohair is a beige. So my cardigan has a bit of a marled fabric that's a bit lighter than the sample in the magazine. I knit the cardigan with 4mm needles. I think that was also suggested in the pattern, but my gauge was a bit tighter, so I had to do some modifications with the math to create the similar shape in the pattern. And I knit the size 2, which I think should give me about 10 centimeters of positive ease. And the only other modification I did was that I knit the cardigan a bit more cropped than in the pattern, so I can try to show that. I think I knit mine 7 centimeters shorter than recommended because I wanted it to be a bit more cropped. If I had the buttons, I could close it there. That's what it would look like. It still has some from the blocking, wants to take a certain shape. And you can also see the sleeves, which are 3/4 length. Overall, I think the shape of the cardigan and of the sleeves looks very elegant, and I am really happy with the finished object. I think this is something that I can definitely wear very casually, but also to nicer events, definitely. It's very beautiful. And for me personally, this is actually my first project using silk mohair. And so the Isajer silk mohair is the only silk mohair that I've ever knit with. So I can't really speak much about the itchiness. For me, it feels very comfortable. I mean, I just have a tank top underneath, so my arms, it's just on my skin and it really feels fine. Not itchy for me, but yeah, I don't really have much to compare it to, unfortunately. So then, moving on to my whips. The first one I want to talk about, which I talked about in my August updates as well, is my columns sweater, which is from a different Line magazine, from number 20, and it's the sweater on the cover. Maybe even for this one I can show a better picture there. For this sweater, the recommended yarn is the My Soft One by Gepard Garn, but I use a different one. I have the Drops Baby Merino in a light blue color, and I can show it now, my progress. I have done a lot of progress on this one because 2 weeks ago I just had a sliver of the back piece, but now, as you can see, I have done, well, here's the back piece, and then I joined the front pieces, first the left and the right, knit those until that part in the neckline, then joined them together, and then finally, there you can see the armhole, I joined together the back and the front piece. So it's finally starting to look like a proper garment. And even for this one, I'm knitting the size 2. And even for this one, I didn't hit gauge. My gauge is slightly tighter, so I had to do the math again to make sure that I had the right measurements. And I am knitting this one as well on 4mm needles. But with this one, doing the math for my own gauge was a bit more problematic because of the lace pattern, and because of that, at the point where I had to join 2 pieces together, like after the neckline here on the front, I did have to kind of compromise and make the lace pattern wrong on purpose in order to continue the lace pattern then correctly on the next round. And same thing after the armholes. Yeah, I had to do the lace pattern wrong for the back so that I could do it properly on the right and then do it properly all around for the next round. But personally, I don't think it's too bad. I mean, when you're just looking at it like this, I don't think you can spot the mistaken rows. And I think it looks pretty good. This is my first time knitting with Drops Baby Merino, and I have to say I'm a bit scared because I have seen some people talk on the internet about how many drops yarns pill like crazy, and this yarn in particular is really soft, so I am a bit scared of how well it's going to fare in use, but that's not really my problem right now. And so far for this one I have used 2 balls of the Baby Merino. Then a little bit about my crochet project, which I can also quickly show. I had 1 square inside the book because that's a handy way of keeping tabs on the pattern that I'm using at the moment. So from this Japanese crochet book, which is the 200 flower motifs of crochet, I am making seat covers inspired by this image, because this book, it basically gives you the recipes of doing the squares, but it doesn't have any proper like patterns, but it just gives you some ideas of what you can make with the squares. And 2 weeks ago my acquisition was this pale yellow yarn from Sandnes Garn. This is the baby wool Lanet. And I have been really inspired to use this yarn. Well, maybe I can first show what I'm working on right now. I'm doing this little yellow square. And I finished this flower with a yellow center. It's not my best flower. I mean, you can tell from the yellow center that it's a bit wonky, but it's good enough. And then I made this flower, which might be one of my best flowers. I think this one is really good. But overall I haven't really been crocheting much because I have been very focused on finishing this cardigan and on my columns sweater. But then finally getting into my autumn knitting, starting my autumn knitting plans, which I made a complete separate video about. Firstly, I have two swatches to show. So I made this swatch for the Aran cardigan by Hitomi Shida, and I am using the Puralana yarn from Cecia, and I knit this swatch with 5mm needles, and I thought that, yeah, it's drapey and nice, but I don't know, it felt almost a bit too loose for my taste. So I decided to try how the yarn would work with much smaller needles. So I used 3.5mm needles, and I made this swatch, which personally I like much better, this fabric, and I think that the cables look much tidier and nicer. And I almost couldn't believe it, but with the 3.5mm needles I actually met gauge for this pattern, so I'm really excited about that. I still have to make a swatch for the other cable pattern used in the cardigan for a different cable, and also because that cable has a different gauge than this one, so I have to make sure that I am matching Hitomi Shida's gauge, or then of course I have to adjust my stitch count. But I think this one looks really nice. So that's the Aran cardigan, still at the swatching stage. I have cast on one of my autumn knitting projects, and that is the Carrie's Slipover by Mary Wallin. It's featured in her Cumbria book. I can show the picture from the book here, with a beautiful photograph, and you can see that it's a Fair Isle slipover with a pretty straight fit, and I am knitting it in the size small, and I'm using the recommended British Breeds yarns in all of the recommended colors except for one, which is Mallard. I substituted that one for Mulberry because I simply had Mulberry and I didn't have Mallard. And I have started on the back piece here. So you just knit it flat. You knit flat the back and front piece and then join them, seam them afterwards. And there you can see I've started knitting with the colors Silver Birch and Mulberry. mulberry is the dark purple. And in here I have just joined the next two colors, which are dark apple and blossom. I am knitting this on slightly smaller needles than recommended. I'm knitting on 3mm needles, and because of that my gauge is a bit tighter than in the pattern, but so far I've had to accommodate it with just knitting 10 more stitches, and it doesn't really affect the pattern that much. And I'm feeling pretty good about this new cast on. So that was my knitting update for now. My first update on my autumn knitting, which I feel very excited about, even though, like I said in the beginning, the weather here in South Finland is still so warm, it really feels like summer. So it feels a bit strange to dig out all the woolly wools and start knitting really warm garments. But I'm not going to let that lessen my excitement and my joy for autumn knitting, and I hope that you are all also really excited about whatever projects you're working on, and I'll see you next time. Bye!